Joe Mankowski with the Department of Fitness and Recreation, and welcome to today's installment of Wellness While We Wait. Now, if you're not familiar with the series, we've teamed up with our friends at Counseling Services and University Ministries to provide some virtual programming geared toward helping members of our Belmont community maintain their wellness while we wait for life to get back to normal. Now, today I'm coming to you from my living room. And we're going to talk a little bit about workout programming while we're all making the difficult choice to self-isolate. Now, I'm also going to share a couple of tips later on toward the end of the video about how you can be sneaky in getting in some physical activity while you're at home. So let's dive into some workout programming. Now, it can seem kind of daunting, I know, but hopefully after our time together today, we'll take some of the mystery out of it and you'll feel confident setting up your next at-home workout. Now, I'm going to assume you don't have much exercise equipment at home. So for today's workout, we're only going to use two things. We're going to use a 1-gallon jug that I filled with water, and we're going to use a couple of cleaning towels. Hopefully you have those. If not, find something heavy. So when we come to workouts and when it comes to workout programming, we like to break things down in terms of movement patterns. And we do this because we don't focus on exercises just like life doesn't normally focus on exercises. You're probably not going to be asked to do a deadlift or an overhead press outside of the gym, but you may be asked to pick something up off the ground or to put something up on a tall shelf. So that's why we focus on this, because these are examples of activities of daily living, and this is going to help make our workouts as transferable as possible. Again, taking what we do inside the gym to our outside everyday life. So we've got 5 different movement patterns that we focus on, and they're really simple. The first one is the bend and lift. The second one is the single leg. The third one is the push. Fourth is the pull. And fifth, and finally, is the rotation. So let's dive into each one of those with a little bit more detail. Now, first one is our bend and lift, like we talked about. And this is going to require flexion or bending of our knee and our hip joints. It's also going to require a little bit of extension or straightening on the way up from a movement. Some of the exercises that we typically think of when we consider this movement pattern are things like deadlifts, things like squats, maybe even some jumping, even some glute bridges to some extent. An activity of daily living that we typically think of when we think of this movement pattern is picking something up off the ground, like I talked about earlier. This could be something like a child, it could be a pet, it could be a pile of dirty laundry, whatever the case is for you. Picking something up off the ground is the activity of daily living. When we do this movement, we're going to be activating muscles on the front and back of our thigh. And those are going to be the quads and the hamstrings, respectively. We're also going to be activating the glute muscle group, which is the muscle group on the backside of our hip. There's some other smaller muscles that are active throughout this process, but these are the prime movers, and so we're going to focus on them, and we're going to treat them as important, which they are. So that was our first movement, bend and lift. Now our second movement pattern is called the single leg movement pattern. And this is very similar to the bend and lift in that it requires flexion and extension of both the knee and hip joint, but the bend and lift usually takes place with 2 feet in the ground or 2 feet with an even base underneath you. The single leg is going to be in a staggered or a split stance. Because of this, it's going to kind of increase some balance demands on our body. So when we think about some of the exercises that bring about this movement pattern, we're thinking about things like split leg deadlifts. We're thinking about things like lunges or step-ups. And we see this movement pattern all the time in everyday life, and especially in activities of daily living, things like taking the stairs, or things like returning to standing after being in a kneeling position. Again, very similar to the bend and lift, so we're going to be using some of those similar muscle groups in the quads, hamstrings, and glutes. But because we're in that staggered or split stance, we're also going to be using muscles on the inside and the outside of our thigh. And again, going to get some of that core activation because we're decreasing our balance that we normally operate with. So first 2 moves, bend and lift, and then single leg. We're going to give our lower body a little bit of a break. We're going to move on to our upper body now. And with our upper body, our 2 main movements are going to be pushing and pulling. And we're going to talk about them very kind of close together because they are very similar. In fact, they're just basically mirror images of each other, just the opposite kind of thing. So pushing, like the name implies, is moving something away from the midline of the body. And in order to do that, it's going to require us to extend or straighten our elbow and flex our shoulder. Now, shoulder movement's a little weird, so I'm not going to dive into that too much. Just trust me, flexion of that shoulder. Again, some exercises that we think about or that come to mind are things like push-ups. There are things like shoulder press, anything where we're pressing overhead. And like I alluded to at the beginning, when we're thinking about pushing, we're thinking about activities of daily living like closing a car door or reaching up to the top shelf of a cabinet to put something away. On the flip side of that, and on the other hand, we've got pulling. And so if pushing is moving away from the midline, pulling is bringing something toward the midline of the body. In order to do this, instead of straightening the elbow, we're going to bend or flex the elbow. And we're going to do the opposite motion on our shoulder as well. So rather than flexing, we're going to extend the shoulder. So flexing the elbow and extending the shoulder is the movement pattern we're doing there. Activities that or exercises that we think about with this are things like pull-ups, they're things like rows, and then the activities of daily living. If we talked about pushing being closing a car door, pulling might be opening a car door. Another really cool one to think about, especially since we'll be using a gallon jug later, is taking a gallon of milk, a gallon of water, whatever the case may be, out of the refrigerator. Another great example for both of these movements, if you're like me and you're missing our daily dose of our campus, our beautiful campus, think about opening a door in Johnson. We know they're heavy and it doesn't really matter what side you're on. You're either going to be pushing or pulling and you're getting a pretty good workout. If you know, you know. When we're using these muscles, when we're doing our pushing exercises, the muscles we'll be activating are typically on the front side of the torso, so like our pecs, and the back side of our upper arm. So this is going to be our triceps muscle group. And then on the opposite of that, when we're pulling, the muscles we'll be using will be on the back side of our torso, which is going to be our lats and our rhomboids, and then the front side of our upper arm, which is going to be our biceps. So those are our first four, our big movements. We've got bend and lift, we've got single leg, push and pull. Last movement we're going to talk about is our rotation. And just like the name implies, it requires rotating or twisting. This muscle movement or this movement pattern is all about the core. Now, if you're wondering, Joe, where are the rest of the core exercises we're going to do today? Well, just trust me that every exercise can be a core exercise. All it requires you to do is brace your core a little bit, just like someone was about to hit you in the stomach. I know it's a weird example, just go with me here. So if all this requires is rotation, the muscles that we're moving are the ones on the outside and even a little bit on the inside of our core. These are going to be our obliques and our rectus abdominis. Some of the exercises that we could do this, or to activate these muscle groups and to use this movement pattern are things like torso twists, things like windshield wipers, and activities of daily living that do this movement pattern are things like putting on a seatbelt, reaching from your top and rotating down to the side. So we've gone over our movement patterns. Let's think a little bit about how we're going to put this all together. So when we create a workout, like I said at the beginning, we want to make sure we've got all of these movement patterns featured. So if you're going down your list, remembering bend and lift, single leg, push, pull, and then rotation. What we're going to do is we are going to put some of these, we're going to replace these exercise movement patterns with specific exercises. Now, feel free to do, when you do your own workout at home, use the ones I picked, or do your own. At the end of the day, if you remember the movement pattern, if you remember the muscles that are activated, you can really substitute anything because it's just plug and play at this point. So for us, what I'm going to show you here in just a second is a bend and lift move. We're going to do a water gallon deadlift. For our single leg, we're going to do a reverse lunge utilizing a towel. For our push exercise, we're just going to do good old-fashioned push-ups, everybody's favorite. For our pulling exercise, we're going to do a water gallon bent over row. And finally, for our rotational exercise, we are going to do a towel hip pull through. A lot of words, not that complicated, I promise. So I'm going to show you these moves real quick. I'm going to move this chair out of the way and we're going to talk about how to do them properly. And then we'll talk about how we structure it all together as a workout. And I'll close out with those 3 tips to get sneaky with some of your physical activity. So the first move we talked about is that water gallon jug deadlift. We're going to put it right in front of our torso, right around our waistline. We're going to keep a soft bend in our knees, and all we're going to do is think about sending our hips behind us. So reaching back with those hips, feeling a stretch in the hamstrings. Not a ton of weight here because it's just a water gallon jug, but we're going to squeeze those glutes, drive the hips forward, trying to keep that same bend in our knees throughout our entire thing. Now we're going to do each of these moves for 45 seconds if you were actually doing the workout, with 15 seconds to rest and get to your next movement. First move, bend and lift. We're doing that water gallon deadlift. Now our next move, we're going to grab a little cleaning towel. So we're going to put this one on the ground, put one foot on top of it, We're gonna go into a reverse lunge, driving the leg back, keeping our torso nice and tall, bending through our front knee, and then driving our hips back up top and our leg back underneath us. When we're doing this move, this is called a unilateral move, meaning it's working one side of the body at a time. So anytime we do a unilateral move in this workout, we'll do 45 seconds on one side, then we're gonna switch legs and do 45 seconds on the other side. So move number one was that water gallon deadlift. Next one is gonna be that towel reverse lunge. After we've done that, we can move both our pieces of equipment out of the way. We're just gonna take it down, and I'm gonna move back a little bit so you can see me. We're gonna take it down to the ground and just do some good old-fashioned push-ups. Now modify these if you need to, but generally we want our hands underneath our shoulders, and we wanna feel our elbows scrape on our sides as we bend through the elbow and then straighten on the way up. Some people may need to drop to those knees in order to get them done. Remember, we're doing 45 seconds here. Now you don't have to move for the entire time. You can do a couple, catch your breath, and then go back in. Quality movement is always going to outweigh the higher quantity of movement. So we did our water gallon deadlift, we did our reverse lunge, we did our push-ups. Now we're going to do our pulling movement. And in order to do that, let's grab our water gallon again. We're going to get in that same hinge position, except this time we're going to hold it here. Keep that core nice and tight. Remember, brace it like someone's about to punch us in the gut. And then we're just going to pull that water gallon toward the back of our body, driving that elbow behind us. We could also think about reaching to touch the ceiling of the room we're in with that elbow. Now this is unilateral. So remember, 45 seconds on one side, 15 seconds to rest, take it to the other side, do the exact same thing. Final movement of the day, our most complicated movement is our plank hip pull through. Now in order to do this, we're gonna grab our towel, we're gonna put it under our foot. Normally when we do this, we can put one under each and go in each direction. I've got a wall in the way, so I can't do that. So I'm gonna show you one side. If you wanna do one side at a time, remember it's unilateral, so do 45 seconds on one side, rest, and go to the other. So take it back down to your plank position, and from your plank position, just like we set up for our push-up, we're gonna hold it steady here, drive our knee up, reach across us, kick it through like you got some style, bring it back, return to center, and extend all the way. A little bit smoother, that's gonna look like this. Now again, I told you, normally we would do this with one under each foot, and you can alternate sides, but I only had enough room to do it to one side. Those are our 5 movements. Again, you don't have to do those. Pick which ones you want. Pick something that's gonna match those movement patterns, whatever makes sense and is best for you. All right guys, so apparently the second half and the tip part of the last video sounded weird and got cut off, so I re-recorded it, but I couldn't leave you without these 3 tips. So 3 really easy things that you can do to be sneaky about getting into physical activity while you're choosing to self-isolate. So number 1 is help out around the house. Whether you're a student going back to family or whether you're a staff member who's got family now with you. Either way, house chores, yard work, really quick ways to get in some moderate activity and make sure you're being physically active. Number 2, if you got to be on a phone call for class, maybe a project or for a meeting, whatever the case may be, try and take it standing. And if you can, walk around a little bit. Now, don't be a distraction to anyone else you're on the phone with or to yourself. You know, don't walk so fast you can't breathe. But try and be up and be mobile. It's just, again, another way to be sneaky. And finally, number 3, go outside. Now I say this with a caveat because I know some cities, some states are doing things a little differently. So if you can go outside and it's not illegal, you feel comfortable doing so, do it. It's a really easy way to be well during this time. And it doesn't have to be crazy. I'm not asking you to go across the country. Just something as simple as going to the mailbox and coming back. Just do that like 20 times. No matter what it is, get up, get active, because we're all gonna get through this if we're doing this together, and on the other end, we gotta be well. So thanks so much for taking some time out of your day to check this out and for prioritizing practicing your wellness while we wait. Now just get up, go do it. Bye.